welcome back to my channel. A couple weeks ago we talked about some of my favorite beach reads for summer, like fiction. I can't put them down. Now we're gonna switch gears and talk more about business books, because let's be honest, business books is more what we talk about here on this channel. So we're gonna go over a couple of business books that I have been reading that have been really great, that I would recommend, and let you know what we got, what's going on, and let's get started. So number one is this book called The Go-Giver, which is by Bob Burg and John David Mann. This is a super quick book. It's actually written as a story, so if you're intimidated by nonfiction, this is the one I would go with. And it's the whole idea of how you run your business by helping people. And so it has, I want to say 5 principles. It has 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, so there's 5 different laws, it says, so principles. The law of value, the law of compensation, the law of influence, the law of authenticity, and the law of reciprocity. And when you are following these 5 things in your business, it really helps your business to thrive and to do well, because you're running it not just in a way that to make money, but you're running it with the ideas of putting people first and really helping people and giving first, the go-giver, giving first, so that you are able to then give the most value, be authentic, be your actual self, and all of those things are going to help you. So this is a super quick read. I think I read in a day, and a really good one for if you need something quick, and maybe if you're feeling a little stuck in your business or just need a mindset shift, this would be the great one. The next one is Company of One by Paul Jarvis. I recommended this one a couple of times because before I was talking about just particular business books. Now we're talking about business books that I've read recently, and this book is all about having a company of one. Look at that. So in it really challenges the idea that you need to hire all these people and have a huge giant business. One thing that really got me is he said he was surfing with his, I think it was an accountant friend, and it was August, and the accountant said, I just made enough money that I don't have to work the rest of the year. Who does that? They're oh, well, I'm good for this year, so let's just keep going. And it really challenges all of the notions of growth for growth's sake and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. There's nothing wrong with growing, but just making sure you're growing in the way that you want to and in the area you want to, because you might be junking up your business with a whole bunch of extra people and a whole bunch of extra headache when you could be doing a lot of things more simply. So it's not necessarily you have to do everything alone, but it's more how can you simplify your business and make sure that your business is actually helping you build the life that you want to build. So highly recommend this one, especially if you have felt overwhelmed. I feel so many people recently have been you need to hire all these people, and yes, hiring is helpful, and yes, it's on my list, but realizing that I don't have to really helps, because he has a really serious business, so good for him. The next 2 are both by the same author, and so let's talk about this one first. So Built to Last is by Jim Collins, and Jim Collins writes he has quite a few books. I have a bunch of them, but they are studies on different businesses, so they're a little more scientific, but they're really fascinating. And even though they're talking about huge publicly traded corporations, they're still very helpful for me building my small little business on the side, and just having the right principles and making sure that I'm doing things smartly. So Built to Last talks about the principles of making sure that you are building a company that is sustainable, which is something I think about a lot, because I always want to be looking longer term and not focusing on the short term and then messing myself up by not paying enough attention to the future. And so that's something that I think about. Not all of these pertain to me. So for example, one of them is called Preserve the Core and Stimulate Progress, and talking all about how you can make progress while also keeping your core values at the center of your business. Talking about really big, huge goals, having really good culture if you have, more than one person, but even if it's just you, having a brand culture where people know what to expect of just you and know what to expect of your YouTube videos, what to expect of your TPT products, all of that kind of stuff, so they're just, on the same page. It also talks about always striving for doing better and continuing to be better, because good is not good enough. which is something I agree with. The other book that's also by him is called Good to Great. This one is interesting because that one's about companies that started well and have lasted a long time. This book is about companies that were okay, or they were good, and then they did something that helped them become great. And so it really exemplifies the differentiators between the good companies and the great companies, which is something that I really like and want to make sure that, you know, those are the things I'm doing. Some of them, again, like they talk a lot about leadership in this book, and I don't currently have a team or anything, so I don't really have anybody to lead except like my dog. But I think I'm the alpha, right? She's not paying attention to me, so maybe I'm not. But they talk a lot about getting the who, but then they talk about things like confronting the brutal facts. So making sure that you're like looking at your data, looking at the correct data, looking at the data that actually matters to move your business forward. It talks about having simple strategies within your business, which is something I struggle with. And then one of my favorite parts is at the end in chapter 8, it talks about the flywheel, it says. And the flywheel is like a wheel that spins and turns. And it talks a lot about how all of these companies, they asked them, because they saw like, you can look, it's actually stock charts, which I don't fully agree with, but you saw like they were okay. Sometimes they went down and then they like shot up on the stock chart as far as like how much their stock was selling for, which should be a measure of their business, but we won't get into all of those details. But my point being that you would think that there's like, here's the thing that happened in there that made a difference, but all of the people they interviewed said it wasn't one thing. Like a lot of times, or it was one thing, but they didn't even realize they were doing it at the time. And so it's just talking about like all of the little things adding up and like having little progress and making small movements forward and adding in these, you know, principles of looking at the data, having a simplistic strategy, having discipline, and all of these different things, just like inch it forward until it finally starts to crank and starts to roll. And usually people don't notice the company until it's been rolling for a while, but it's not like a continuous thing. It's you gotta, you know, inch it forward before it will finally start moving on its own, as opposed to the doom loop, which is when you're like, oh, something needs to change. You hire new management, they try all these new strategies, they abandon the new strategies, and then you hire new management because everything stinks. And so just comparing those two different areas and talking about like kind of, I felt like it was almost the culmination of like, you know, you make sure you have the right people, you make sure that you're confronting the brutal facts, you don't lose faith, you're simplifying, you're doing all these things, and then finally it starts rolling. And I will say that so far in my business, I mean, I'm definitely not like a giant business person, but so far in my business, that's definitely what happened. Like it was slow, and then it's like something clicks and it finally starts working and it finally starts rolling, and you can't point back to like, oh, this is the magic day when everything changed, but it just, you know, starts accelerating. So if you're in that like beginning stages where you're like inching forward, I understand, I got you. Keep going, because if you keep going, then it will hit and it will start working. My last one is a little bit different, and that is this one called Working Backwards, Inside Stories and Secrets from Inside Amazon by Colin Breyer and Bill Carr. So these two authors started working at Amazon pretty early on in Amazon's history and were there for a really long time. So they are like literally they're from the inside and they know all the secrets of how Amazon runs their business. And even though Amazon is, again, a huge corporation, I found so many useful, practical tips in this book that was so fascinating. Also, just in case you are, you know, someone who likes Amazon, that really helped and that I can like have immediately been applying to my business. So some of them, again, are not going to be super pertinent. So they talk a lot about hiring in this one, which is ironic because in the other book they talk about how getting the right people is the most important thing to having your business. But regardless, they talk a lot about, there's a whole chapter about communicating. Instead of having slide decks, they type out 6-page like reports basically of ideas and what they want to do and all of that kind of stuff, instead of having like PowerPoint slides, which again, I don't have a team, so that's not, but what I found helpful with that is the idea that when you actually like sit down and like use words and use narratives, it helps you to form your ideas in ways that you can communicate better. And so that's something I've been thinking a lot of. So for example, like making sure that I write my blogs before I do videos, and making sure that I have plans and I have all these things to make sure that like everything is just clearly communicated. I spend a lot of time with my journal just like writing things down so that they can get things out of my head, and a lot of that is based off of this principle. Like it says, the title is working backwards, and that's something big on Amazon. They talk about what the user experience is going to be and work back from there. So like what's going to be the easiest thing for the user to use, what's going to be the most helpful for the person who is purchasing the product, who's doing all the things, and then how can we work backwards to make sure that we're working that way. So starting with the end result in mind, of course, but really emphasizing the end result that the customer is gonna see, and making sure that your focus is on the customer is like a good perspective to have as you're creating products, being like, what's the easiest thing for my customer? So I've been thinking about ways that I can help my customers even more and help make things easier and more simplistic for them. And the final thing I'm going to share that was super important that we can all apply to our businesses is, and this is not everything they talk about obviously, but it's talking about metrics and managing your inputs, not your outputs. So it's really easy in online business to look at how much money you've made, or how many products you're sold, or all of those things. And those are important, obviously, if we want to make money, because that's the whole reason you're in business. But that's the outcome, not the, I was gonna say income. Input. It's the output, it's not the input. So you want your inputs are the things that you are doing to move the business forward. So that's like making the products, making the videos, making the, you know, posting on social media, that's sending the emails. It's all those things that are like down in the weeds that you're doing that then produce the outputs. But the reason this is important is because they don't always align perfectly, which is something that you might be able to see, especially like most of you are teacher sellers, so you sell teaching resources. So right now it's June, and you know what, I'm putting a lot of inputs in and I'm not getting a lot of outputs out because it's June and people just aren't buying like they are the rest of the school year because they're not in school. Totally understandable. That's completely out of my hands why the output is here. There's things I can do to help it, but still, but I can control the inputs. And so really making sure that you're controlling like all the things that you are doing in order to move the needle forward, and recognizing that the dollar amount is not the full picture. Typically in business, especially online business, I see it takes about 3 to 6 months for things to iron out. So like if I post a whole bunch of products, usually it's like 3 months later that they start really gaining traction and really helping moving my business forward. Same for pretty much everything. It takes about 3 to 6 months to like get your YouTube channel off the ground, to get your blog off the ground, like of actually doing things. And so there's a delayed response there. And so you want to make sure you're monitoring what you're doing and not what's happening to your business. Like what are you doing to your business, not what's happening to your business. So another example is, again, since I am the TPT seller, when we get to back to school time, my sales are going to go way up. And there are things that I do that help that. There's things I'm currently doing to help that, but a lot of it has nothing to do with me and just has to do with the fact that people are shopping in September and August and they're not shopping in June and July, and that's out of my hands. And so just really differentiating like between what's happening and what you're doing, because if you are focusing too much on the dollar amount, you might either get discouraged or you might not notice trends that you should be noticing to make sure that your business is staying afloat, because again, there's a lag time. So if you let things go, then you might not see that for a few months. So just making sure that you're monitoring your inputs, focusing on your inputs, not your outputs. Yes, money's great, but focus on your inputs because that's the stuff that you can control. I would say especially if you're new and you don't have a lot of output yet, then make sure you're really looking at the inputs and make sure you're monitoring what you are doing. How much time am I spending on my business? How much am I working? How many things am I checking off my list? Those are going to be your most important metrics to look at right now. So Focus on your inputs, not your outputs. That was one of my favorite things out of this book. I will link all of those books down below in the description in case there's one that strikes your fancy you would like to purchase. And I would love to know what you have read recently that has been helpful. So leave your business book recommendations down below in the comments. I will see you next time. Thanks so much for watching, and bye.